Hi friends, hope you are doing well. I'm Dr. Ganguly. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the L1 visa, and essentially many of you know that this is a visa which lets you come to the US if you are somebody who is working in a company and is transferred to the US branch of this particular company. So unlike the typical H1 visa, which many people are familiar with, this visa does not have a cap or a limit in terms of the number of visas which can be granted each year. So we are going to look deeply into this L1 visa and how you can use it if you are somebody who is seeking to get a position in a company in the United States. So let's begin. Now, before I embark on this discussion, I should mention that I'm not an immigration lawyer, and whatever I'm saying is from my personal experience and experience of people I know and information I have garnered from the public domain. So if you are somebody who is seeking professional advice, you should always consult with an immigration attorney. Now, with that disclaimer, let's start the process. Now, as far as the L1 visa is concerned, I see that it has become quite popular among a lot of people. And in fact, if you meet many people in the US, you will see that they have come at a relatively later stage of life. So sometimes they have come to the US when they are in their 40s, in their 50s, and so on. And I have even encountered some people who have moved to the US in their 60s. So how is this possible? Now, what they have done is they have taken advantage of the L1 visa. Now, what happens with the L1 visa is that if you are working in a company which is outside the US, this company can essentially move you to a branch which is inside the US for some reason. And there are essentially two types of visa here. The L1A visa is there, which is there for people who are typically managers or executives. And the L1B visa is there, which is for people who have some sort of specialized knowledge. So this could be technical knowledge, it could be scientific knowledge, it could be programming knowledge, or it could be some systems type of knowledge. So now let's look at each of these visas in detail. If we look at the L1 visa, this is typically valid for 3 years and it can be renewed for 4 more years. So essentially you are getting 7 years of time to work in the US. Like I mentioned before, it is typically meant for managers. So though there is no specific requirement about the type of degree you should have to get this visa, you would generally think that at least a bachelor's degree would be required here if you are somebody who is working as a manager in a typical company and is moving to the US. Very often these people may also have a master's degree under their belt or sometime even a PhD. So it's obvious that any kind of degree adds weight to your particular case. Now, what do you have to do in US? You have to be some sort of supervisor. So you have to make the case that you are managing several people. You are probably some kind of team lead, manager, supervisor, project manager, and so on. And this kind of role certainly comes with experience. So you must have several years of experience under your belt before you are a good contender for the L1A visa. Now, of course, the requirement here is that you should have at least 1 year experience in the company before you apply for this visa. But I have seen that in most cases, companies typically like the person to work for several years before they consider them for this L1A visa, because what happens is that they only want to move relatively senior management talent to the US because they are in short need or they are short of such talent. Now let's look at the L1B visa, which is given for specialized knowledge. So this visa is essentially given for 3 years and then renewed for 2 more years. So here you have a total of 5 years under this visa, and this visa also does not mention any degree requirement. But I have seen that most people who have got this visa have at least a bachelor's degree, and sometimes they often have a master's degree, and in a few cases they may even have a PhD. Now in the case of the L1A visa, of course, a lot of managerial experience is certainly valuable, but if somebody has an MBA, that certainly comes in handy, or a master's degree. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, one of the things about the L1 visa is that it is a dual intent visa. So one of the things people often are able to do in the L1 visa is that they are able to quickly apply for the green card under the EB1 category. So what happens is that these people are already somewhat senior. They are quite known experts in the field in terms of management or specialized knowledge. So it is relatively easy for a company to make the case that they should be given the green card. Now, if we compare with the H1B visa, which typically has a cap of 85,000 people per year, one of the advantages of the L1 is that there is no cap here. So as many people as is required can be given this visa to move into the US system. So many people have a problem that they have to apply for the lottery in the H1B visa case. I have given a few situations where you are out of the lottery system or there is no cap. This is only if you are seeking jobs in academic institutions or certain non-profits. I'm going to leave that video in the end screen for people who are interested in the cap-free H1B visa. But beside that particular route, there is no other route available for people who did not make it through the H1B lottery except the L1 visa here and also the O1 visa, which I have discussed sometime before, which is also for people who have some level of exceptional talent. So these are ways in which you can enter the US in a different manner. Now, one thing which I have seen is that many people who are applying for the L1 visa, sometime or the other, they probably were working in the US and they had gone back for some reason. So in fact, there are people who had got the H1B visa and then they finished this visa and they had returned back to their home country, and several years later they were working in a US company or in some multinational company and they were able to come back to the US on the L1 visa. So of course that is something which is possible. Now, one of the advantages of this visa is that there is no wage requirement here, but do remember that the company will typically not pay you a very low salary, because in that case the visa will not go through. There may be issues raised by the USCIS and so on. Now, beside the person who gets the L1 visa, their spouse and any unmarried children they have under the age of 21 qualify for the L2 visa. And one of the advantages of the L2 visa is that if you get the L2 visa and after some time you apply for the employment card or the EAD, you are able to work. So this is a big advantage. Of course, H4 people can also work if they get the EAD, but the L2 is also something which they can avail of. Now, one advantage here is that if you get your children in the US in the L2 visa system, they can go to any local school and also they can attend universities and colleges down the road if they are below the age of 21. So in fact, this I have seen is something which encourages many people to apply for the L1 visa, because what happens is that if they are staying in some foreign country, maybe even their children are US citizens, they were born here before some time because they had a prior visit to the US, they often come back in the L1 visa and get the green card, and their children are able to study in the local colleges and universities. So this is something which is motivating many people who are in their 40s, 50s to apply for the L1A or the L1B visa and move to the US. Now, one of the easy ways to get this visa is actually to work in a US company, or if you are not able to work in a US company, maybe in some kind of multinational company which is based outside the US. And if you have a lot of things going on in the US, your company has a lot of activity in the US, after some time you can suggest to your management that you want to take advantage of the L1 visa or you want to move to the US for some management job. And in many cases, if they have some kind of work here, they are going to help you to get this visa. So remember, this visa has to be sponsored by the employer concerned. You cannot self-sponsor yourself for this visa. So the employer has to make the case that they really need this person in the US, and then their immigration attorneys are going to file this application on your behalf. And most of the time, if your employer is a legitimate employer, if it is somebody who is reasonably well known in the immigration system, then you will have no difficulty in getting the L1 visa. So this was my take about the L1 visa. Many people get somewhat despondent when they do not qualify for the H1B lottery and they do not know how to move to the US. If that is one of their aims, then of course they can consider working in some company in their home country and after some time applying through the L1 visa route, because this is something which is very possible. Of course, the possibility of the H1B no cap is there, but that is only for people who can work in universities and maybe hospitals and medical centers and non-profits and so on. And that's somewhat difficult for people unless they have probably some kind of PhD degree or postdoc, Also, the O1 visa is another possibility, and if you are somebody who has a PhD degree and has a lot of expertise, or even a master's degree, maybe you have filed a lot of patents, maybe you are somebody who is a startup founder, then you can also consider the O1 visa, which is also possible in many cases. So this was my take about the L1 visa. Many people had asked for this in some of the comment section, and so I thought I'll make a video on this topic, and I will see you in a video sometime soon. See you then.